Hi friends, it's Sarah from Ruffles and rainboots.com, and today I'm sharing some roller skates. I'm going to be creating a pom-pom gnome using these as the base, and if you'd like to make it, stick around. As always, please give this video a like so I know you're here. Go ahead and subscribe too. So about 18 months ago, I designed this little pom-pom gnome, and I decided I needed to come up with a way to make roller skates that everybody could do. So it doesn't matter what I'm using as the base, the size is what you need to adjust. So I'm going to be using a pre-made pom-pom out of fur, 1/4 inch wood beads with the hole, and some DOS air dry clay. I'm also going to be using bamboo skewers and of course paint. So I'm going to cut 1 inch across the entire block of clay, cut that in half and put one aside because we need to make sure our clay doesn't dry out. So we put it in a zip top sealed bag. Now I will say go ahead and sand the pieces before you begin, before you get your clay out, and then clean up that area. The clay will adhere to the plastic a little bit better. Now, because it's been so long since I made these, I actually helped somebody make some out of K-cups. I helped somebody else make a smaller set out of a bottle cap, like a water bottle cap. So so you know, these can be scaled up or down, doesn't matter what your base is. So if you're out of the country or you can't find these Dollar Tree booties, just get creative. You just need something that's going to hold the leg. You can build out the front of the boot, you can build out the wheels, and you can build out the boot top, which is what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to put on the back of the boot first. I'm going to wrap that under the bottom, and then we're going to be cutting off some of this. Just make sure that if you are starting with these booties, make sure you're adding about the same height as you have at the bottom of the shoe so that you get that nice boot effect. This also works for ice skates. I had a reader where we worked through making little Dollar Tree booties into ice skates. I hope to film that one day. All right, so this part is just going to be covering up the front, and I just cut it flat so that I could just, line it up because I'm going to be putting a nice big rolled tongue on there. So you saw me cut away the portion, that center portion of the boot where the big rolled tongue is going to go. So air dry clay is really easy to work with. Don't make it too thin and you're good. So I have a hole in the bottom of these because these are the Dollar Tree booties, and you can choose to fill that and then cover it with clay. I did not. Every once in a while, if you can't get something to be smoothed out, you just take a tiny little bit of water and try and smooth it out the best you can. We are going to sand these after they're dry. This is one of my first little tips of failure, and that is air dry clay will shrink up a little bit, but I did not make them wide enough to actually put a needle through. And in case you do that, I'm going to show you how we fix it. So we're going to set those aside and just clean up your area. Clay is not something you want drying and then you inhaling. So we're going to put 4 or 8 of these little 1/4 inch beads onto a skewer. You can see they fit. And this is from my kitchen, so it's not even fancy skewer. And we just painted them all black. I did 2 coats of those before I varnished them with Liquitex varnish. And the reason I'm varnishing them is because 1, we want to protect the surface in case you sell these. 2, it makes you look like a rock star. So now we've waited overnight. It's time to put on a very nice protective mask and sand our clay boots. So you'll see some fingerprints, you'll see some divots. I did try and make it leather look in the back and sort of like scrunch it up a little bit, but we do want the rest of it to be relatively smooth. So then I get out a little bit more clay and I just create 2 little pencil eraser shapes using little round bits of clay so that I can put those on for the front, the little stopper, the little rubber stopper. And then I'm just going to roll a larger piece of clay, cut it in half, and those are going to be the tongues. So I am going to make sure that I cut a nice little rectangle here, and it's thick. You see how thick this is? This is not a thin piece. And the reason is because number 1, we're going to cut out a center channel. And number 2, we need it to have a little weight to it. So you can see I'm rounding the front just like a boot would be, and then I'm just rolling over that front. You don't have to do that. If you want to make yours more realistic, that's fine. To attach it, I'm going to score both pieces, add a tiny amount of water, and then press that and blend out the 2 pieces together. So I am going to be putting a little piece there to hold up that tongue, but only after I finish working this. So I'm just kind of making a scrunched up piece of foil, and that's going to be holding the tongue in place while I cut out the center channel. Do you have to do this? No. I was listening to a really, really good Audible book, and I was like, what else can I do to add some time down here in my craft room? So I'm just cutting it out with an X-Acto knife, and then I'm going to smooth that in. And again, that's where my shoelaces are going to go. So that's what that piece is. All right. So I make another one. I'm showing you how thick it is. It is not a thin piece. Just FYI, it needs to be able to dry and shrink up a little bit. So don't make anything too thin. Okay. That's my only tip for air dry clay. It does shrink a tiny bit. So now we're going to put the stoppers on. So I'm going to do the same thing where a tiny little bit of water, a couple of scrapes with my X-Acto knife, and then I'm going to press this on. I found that I edited all this part out because it would be 45 minutes, but I found that it was easier to just blend the front after you get the back really well attached. Okay, so focus on the back. You can see I'm just blending the front, but I take some of that clay right off that stopper and just pull it right up onto the back in that hole there. If you don't have that, you can use a tiny little piece of metal going from one portion of clay to another portion of clay just to make sure that never falls off. So I repeated it with the second boot. And you can see now I'm going to be propping up this little thing. I didn't want it to slide off and fall. So you can use foil, you can use a marker. And guess what? Now it's time to wait yet again. All right, so now that they're dry, you can see I have a new manicure even. I'm going to start with paint. So I wanted this stopper to be, at least when I was a kid, I had a very berry pink stopper on my roller skates. And I painted the bottom of this black. It helps to hide the fact there's a big hole in the bottom of these. Now, I wanted pastel rainbow. If you don't, just paint them white. The air dry clay is not quite white. So if you do want the vintage style white boots that we probably all had growing up, do use a white acrylic or a white gesso to get that. But if you want to torture yourself with some pastel ombre, I learned that dry brushing those two colors together and two coats is the way to go. So all I'm doing here is just going to be cleaning my brush off in between these colors. And that green is like Technicolor green, but it'll get a little bit better in just a second. Just put all my colors on and blend them as I go. I found that was the easiest way to do it. And now I'm going to repeat that for the second boot. And I have to, just FYI, I had to keep picking it up to get the sizing right I was very willy-nilly on my sizing on the first one. So after I dried it, I just did the second coat, and it was so much easier to get the ombre blends between those colors on the second coat because the colors were all down. All right, so I'm getting all that on. Again, that green is just so Technicolor, but it did dry a little less bold. All right, so give it a dry again. Make sure both of them are done. And now it's time to paint little cut pieces of skewers. That's going to be our truck. We're going to build a little wheel and axle assembly. So I used white embroidery thread, added a knot, and glued this on because, as I mentioned, I don't know what I did. I didn't make it wide enough to actually thread my embroidery through. So I'm not sure what I did. But I'm just gluing it in a crisscross pattern because no one can tell. So I thought it was easier than trying to create holes in the thing all the way down. So you can see I'm just crisscrossing it from left to right. And both of my ends are tied so that it doesn't fray. And this is it. We're going to make the gnome, and you're going to say, so much easier, Sarah. And I'm going to say, yes, it is. All the work is in these boots. All right, so now I'm just going to get this all prepped. You can use hot glue or E6000. If you sell, I recommend super glue or E6000. But we're just going to pop the axle, which is the bamboo skewer, into the bead and glue it in place. That just literally went like 20 feet. But we're going to cut it down to size so that it's basically, we're going to glue the wheels directly to the bottom of the skate. And the reason is because I could not figure out how to make it all work as an engineered rolling skate. And so I thought this was good enough. Again, if you're selling, I would highly recommend super glue or E6000 to put these on. I'm using hot glue. And I just glued them right to the bottom. Look at that. And look, she's all done. Well, she's done. Now I have to do the second way. But I really love this little guy. And I really love using these little booties as a base. where it's something other than fabric. And I hope you like them too. Let me know. I would love to hear what you think of these. Let me know down in the comments. Would you make them? Do you like them? Do you have a better way to make them? As always, thank you so much for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll be back next week with the little gnome.